Welcome to Platonic Love. This is week 2 of 6, and we're reading the Symposium, the 15th of September. Take it away, Bernie.
Oh, okay. Well, welcome everyone. I'm really excited this week. The reading, I read it again, and it was great. It was a great read. I really enjoyed it. So I hope you're going to enjoy it. So this week is called Lover's Ascent to Absolute Beauty. I'll just do a little recap where we're up to, which especially Aristophanes, and Agathon, because we didn't actually do Agathon last week, which is great because actually that is very important kind of entree to what happens in the Socrates speech. So I'll get going right up to Socrates, and then we can have a bit of a chat about it. And then, because the next section's quite long, so we'll do it that way, see how we go. Okay, so remember we're at the Symposium, a drinking party or an orgy, but this one's a special one because it's a day after celebrations of Agathon's winning the prize with his tragedy at a festival. And so everyone's a bit subdued because they had big celebrations the night before and they're quite hungover. So they sent away the dancing girls and decided on a more serious affair. Let's all make speeches in praise of love. So off they go. So it was kind of in Phaedrus's honor that the speeches were made, because it was mentioned that he's really into love and he thinks that love really doesn't get much of a go these days. So this is to redress it. And he's first came off the rank, and his speech is very much a eulogy to love. And so it's gushing, you know, and all wonderful, and love is everything, love is great, and so on. After that, we get Pausanias, and as we remember, he's the long-term lover of Agathon, and that's kind of important in what's going on. So Agathon is the younger of the partner, but these guys are kind of together, and the sense is that they want to be together for life, which is unusual in the culture. So Pausanias uses the two myths of Eros to divide love into the common and the heavenly. The common loves mere bodies, and the heavenly loves souls. So love of slightly bearded boys is the highest love, where sex is exchanged for education in the virtues, which was pretty culturally standard. So there's the higher, the higher love, so getting into the higher love prepares you for spending your whole lives together. So that was his style of love. Now, the third speech is Eryximachus, and he's, as we remember, a physician and natural science expert, and he broadens the scope of love. So this is the first time in the dialogue we really open it up, that love has a more broader definition. So love is the motive of all human and natural processes. He agrees with Pausanias that there's two types of love, but he aligns the two types with health and disease. So it's right to gratify the body with good, healthy desire, but wrong to gratify bad desire due to disease. So then he gets on to medicinal love in its medicinal application, and he talks about how love brings harmony of opposites, or unity of opposites, and talks about opposites which were commonly standard thinking about the body and health, which is the balance of hot and cold, bitter, sweet, dry and wet. So And then we get on to Aristophanes. So this is quite a longer speech and quite an intricate speech, and really interesting at many different levels. So we know that Aristophanes is a comic poet, a famous poet. His poems are still, playwright, but it is poetry, of course, and his plays are still performed today. He's quite famous to this day. And so he's an older contemporary of Plato. So Plato probably knew him. And he's famous in this context of making fun of Socrates in one of his plays called The Clouds. And, you know, it's some of the evidence of the historical Socrates is in that play. So he presents a myth of human nature where the love is love for our other half. And we were once whole, but are now incomplete due to the crime of attacking the gods. So due to some original sin. The original wholes were three genders, male, female, and a combination of both. So sexual desire is desire to become whole again, and these three genders explain the desire for male and the desire for female and the various combinations. So this desire is never completely satisfied, and so that is why it's unceasing. Love is desire for the other, but the other is unattainable. So he says, desire draws the two halves of our original nature back together and tries to make one out of two to heal the wound in human nature. And he says, love is the name for this desire, the desire to be fused together, if that was possible. And it's the pursuit of wholeness. So love for the other aims at healing the human sore. So lots of different metaphors here. Of separateness. Sex is about attempting to reach a union of opposites that, as we said, is unattainable. Now, Aristophanes pleads that there is some seriousness behind his comic story. For our sins or crimes, we are all dispersed by God. If we are pious and make friends with the gods, then we might find our other half. This is not a mockery of the relationship between Pausanias and Agathon. Perhaps they are actually the fortunate ones. Perhaps we all can only achieve happiness is if each of us finds our beloved and restores our original nature. Okay, so now we get on to Agathon, which is kind of like a prelude to Socrates' speech, and we'll see why that is as we move through it. So Agathon, you remember, is the genial host. He's very polite, made everyone feel comfortable. He's young, beautiful, intelligent, and now a prize-winning playwright. And he's the long-term partner of Pausanias. Agathon's name, interestingly, also means the good. And he's a student under Gorgias. Now, some of you might know that actually there's a dialogue called Gorgias, which is Socrates talking to this famous teacher of rhetoric. And so it's understood that this eulogy that Agathon presents is in the style of Gorgias. So the speech is another eulogy, classic format with gushing praise. Eros is the most beautiful, the best, and the youngest of the gods, and stays young forever. Now, later, as we'll remember, I think I mentioned, Cupid is actually younger again. So this talk that other people had of this older Eros, This is a mistake, he says. This is actually the god necessity being confused for Eros. Eros did come, he wasn't one of the firstborn, he came much later. And this explains why there was so much violence earlier on, and then that stopped with Eros bringing love and so peace. Agathon wants to shift the discussion away to characteristics of the god itself, which is where you should start in a classic eulogy. So about his characteristics, and this is important for the progression of the discussion later. Eros is soft and sensitive and graceful, and so on goes Agathon through the cardinal virtues, attributing them all to love. Eros is soft and likes soft, is beautiful and likes the beautiful. So take note of that, because this will come up in the Q&A with Socrates. Love was of surpassing beauty and goodness, and is latterly the cause of such excellences in others. And, you know, it's sort of like, well, everyone's a poet when they're in love. So that's Agathon's speech. And now we get this little interlude, another interlude again, and it's like through the whole thing, Socrates just can't wait to get the Q&A happening. He tried it a bit earlier and then he was shut down. And now he sort of goes off again. But first of all, he says, oh, you know, as Maria was saying earlier before we started, when someone, when Socrates celebrates your speech, the red light should be flashing because you know he's going to bring you down. But he brought him down in a nice way. So Socrates said he didn't realize that it was going to be eulogies. And he thought that what he should do is speak the truth about the subject in praising it. So Socrates says, I'm not going to do a eulogy, but what about I just tell the truth? And everyone just wants him to speak, you know, get on with it, but he's sort of, you know, getting on his high horse. And then there follows this Q&A with Agathon. So Socrates shows that if love desires the beautiful and the good, then love must lack these. So it must be, in some sense, not beautiful and not good, the opposite of the attributes that Agathon attributed to it. So remember, Agathon was going, is beautiful and brings beauty to other things or likes beauty, whereas Socrates is bringing in this opposite sort of thing. So desire, like with other things we've looked at in the Phaedo and in Republic for the people who did it, desire is like this drive, which is a drive related to opposites. So the desire is for what you don't have in this case, so what you lack. So desire is not about engendering like. Desire, and so this relates to the becoming other alternation of opposites type generation that Plato's into. And, you know, and we can think of that as like desire for the greener grass on the other side. You know, we always want what we don't have in that expression. So desire for more is also like this. So desire is for more is desire for also for a lack. So it's like desire to become richer. So you become rich, but you want to become richer, or desire for something that you have now, but want in the future. So these greater than sort of things or future wants are actually also lacks. That's what he's trying to say. They're also lacks. You might have it now, but you want it in the future. You might have desired to be, if I just get to, you know, like assistant manager and I get that income, I'll be okay. Oh, but now I want to be manager because I need more money for my beach house and so on. So desire just keeps going on for more and more. And that's related to a lack. And, you know, tomorrow never comes. You know, you're never satisfied with, you always want more. So Diotima will, as we will see, will go on to claim that beauty is not an attribute of love, which is what Agathon was saying, but actually the object of love as a medium. So we'll get into that next, but I think I've spoken enough, and we certainly need a break and a chat before we get into the big interview of the goddess Diotima and what she has to say in Socrates' consultation on the mysteries of love. So before we start that, has anyone got any comments or any reflections on how they read it? Anything I left out?
It was just when you were saying a minute ago, you want to become manager, that was the thing that kept coming through my mind, that some of the greediest people in the world are the people who have plenty and they want to have more. And just from my reading of it, it didn't seem to address it that way. There seemed to be left like an open question about that people want what they don't have, when what you're saying, and I agree with you, there are many people who have, but they're still greedy. It's not what they lack. They still want more, even though they don't lack it.
Well, they lack more. This is the thing, they lack more, like it's endless desire because you endlessly want more. So you've reached a certain income, you've got one beach house, you want a ski resort as well, or something, you know, you always want more. So it's this desire. So if you direct your desire towards wealth or fame or whatever else, you can keep the desire, it's hard to turn it off, isn't it? I mean, we see that. And so I think that's really what he's talking about. This is what love is in the more broader sense. The question is that an appropriate object of love, I suppose?
Is there a suggestion that all kinds of love are okay or good, even if it's a love for you know, wanting more things, you know,
okay, well, why don't we put that out to the group? Does anyone want to respond to that?
Can you repeat the question? I missed it.
Oh, yeah, it's just that is there a suggestion in the dialogue so far that any kind of love is good, and no matter what the object is? Is that right, what you said, Kula?
yeah, yeah.
Let's go on in the next section to talk about that. And you call happy those who are in possession of good and beautiful things? Certainly. So there is some discussion about that coming up, I think.
I think ugly love was out. No ugly love.
Yeah, you can't love the ugly, can you? No. Is there beauty in everything?
Say the baby's so ugly, only his mother could love it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
But what I find a little bit irritating is in the beginning of the questions and answers, Socrates, you know where he's leading, and it's very pointedly in one direction. And in your mind, you can immediately see the opposite argument. And in this case, where point out the opposite argument, that you're not only desiring what you don't have now, but desiring for the future or for permanence. So it's annoying then that he immediately backtracks and then brings forward the argument that if you seek beauty, therefore you must be wholly without beauty and ugly. It seems to be backtracking when he's already given you the reassurance that if you have beauty or something good, you may still want more of that.
No, I'm not sure how to respond to that.
Because virtually after he has explained that,
Yes.
that you're looking, you may be beautiful and seek to possess beauty all the time or in the future, it's in the very next paragraph, or it's certainly later in the dialogue, that she comes back to saying, therefore, if you are beautiful, you must be completely devoid of beauty and as ugly as hell. Mind or body or soul, or whichever. Yeah.
If you are completely beautiful, you have no desire for beauty. Is that what was
I think the phrase was, you must be holy without beauty.
Yeah, I understood the opposite too, for some reason, but I won't swear by it.
But after explaining that they need not be incompatible, just reverting back to that, I find irritating.
Okay. Okay.
But is that where it also says that because you're not beautiful, that doesn't mean that you are ugly, and because you're ugly, there is no beauty. It's in between.
No, that comes later. That was explained further along again.
Yes, yes. It's not that. Okay. So it's about if you desire beauty, you don't have to be completely ugly. Is that what you were saying, Martha?
Sorry, I haven't bookmarked it, but
No.
if
That's all right.
There's just so much in it, really. And when you talk about it, you sort of you realize there's so much in it, even in the short pieces.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And what I get, I mean, the overriding theme, and maybe this is my bias because it's just ignored in academic studies of Platonism, is the overriding theme for me is opposites and desire of opposites. And I've certainly drawn that out, as you've probably seen. And so this notion of lack and this notion of desiring the other, I think they're the key. That's the key dynamic that he's trying to bring out here. So it's not that like engenders like in the case of desire. Desire is about opposites and desiring the opposite, and that's how it mediates. That's how love works, and that's how love creates, and that sort of thing. So that's even in Aristophanes.
Yeah, and understanding transience gives if you appreciate that beauty is transient, then you have the desire for permanence. So I can understand that.
Yes.
Contradiction yeah.
Oh, I see. Okay, so I
just feel that in some senses the logic doesn't flow so beautifully.
Yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, I'm following now. Yeah. Okay. So anyone else got any comments on the section of the text? So Aristophanes and the Agathon speech.
I actually quite like the way he argues. I know, in some ways I think somebody in the first class we did said that Socrates is a bully. And I actually found that quite amusing. And in a sense, he certainly can be. But I think in this case, I actually quite like what he's done. I think what he's done is he's pretty much, waited until the end, or he's been allocated the end. So he's then taken everybody's arguments, and particularly, was the last one, what was his name?
Agathon.
Agathon?
Yeah.
So he's taken that argument in particular, and I quite like the question and answer thing, because I think that's when we start to question ourselves. Even though sometimes it's quite amusing as it comes out in the way the translation happens, I actually think it's quite playful in a sense, but then there's a sense of depth to it as well. I think that's what I quite like about it.
Yeah, look, let me just take this back to something that I think I mentioned in the in the Reading Plato earlier classes, which is Plato's relationship with logic and logical arguments. Now, on the one hand, he uses, he doesn't give much credit to it as giving the truth. It helps to find the truth, but it doesn't give the truth. So what he does, like in those early dialogues and stuff, is he uses argument, which is other people's techniques, the sophist techniques, to demolish their arguments. So he uses it in a skeptical way, the same way that modern skeptics like Jacques Derrida would use it. If you know any modern skeptics like postmodernists and post-structuralists, they will use argument and they will come to a skeptical conclusion. So he uses it in that way. He also uses it in a positive way to awaken you to thinking about it. Remember the midwife thing and all that. And so he's kind of got this attitude. I mean, I don't know. I see it, the attitude to argument sometimes, which is not very serious. And it's just a tool to awaken thought. Because look what happens. You get to a really important point, right? Think of the people who did the Republic. He gets to this really important point. He has to explain this thing that actually you can't use words for. So he uses the sun analogy, and you get the allegory of the divided line, and you get the allegory of the cave, and you get all that stuff. He's not using argument there. And when he throws in these myths, he's not using argument there either. So it could be annoying, and I can see how it is annoying, but maybe we should have a different attitude to it and not take it too seriously. Just kind of see it as a bit of a, you know, like you might take arguments when you're listening to a play or something. So
I have to agree with,
yeah.
I have to agree with Jackie. I found it a lot nicer reading it, and I was wondering whether it's because it was him getting questioned by Diotima that I enjoyed, because he was copying what he usually said.
Yeah, isn't it great?
Yeah.
Isn't it great? Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. Well, that's almost a segue. Should we go straight into it then? Yeah.
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Okay. Here we go. Okay. So it's Socrates' turn, and he says, "Oh, well, you know, I'm going to tell the truth, but actually, what I'm going to tell you about is this conversation I had with a mistress of love. She knows all about it." Diotima of Mantinian. I'm struggling with the pronunciation, Mantinian. And so I'm going to tell you all about her because she knew all about it and she taught me everything I know about love. So, wow, great. So now, of course, this Diotima is evidently a fictional character. I mean, I think that at the time people would have realized this, especially like where she comes from. She comes from Mantinian, and Mantic means prophet. So she comes from kind of like the land of prophets, you know, like hint. So it's a myth. And then there's a myth in the myth. So, and then you think that's in the play, and then there's a frame dialogue. So think of where we are now, and then we go into the layers, which just really makes it very rich. Okay, so now what we've got to notice also is that Socrates takes up Agathon's role. Socrates says that with Diotima, I made much the same case as Agathon, that love is the greatest god and he himself is most beautiful. Now this was refuted by Socrates refuting Agathon by saying that if love loves beauty and good, then it must lack these. So what we were talking about earlier. So, okay, so we're there. We've done the Agathon thing. Basically, Socrates has pretty much used Agathon's argument with Diotima, and now we go into the Diotima thing. So now Socrates continues. But does that make, if love lacks beauty and good, does that make love ugly and bad? And Diotima in this translation, blasphemy. Do you think that everything that isn't beautiful is ugly? So, you know, I think, oh, well, what about the opposite stuff? But we must remember how the opposite stuff works and participation and all that. So there's a lot going on here. And the people who have have done the Republic will have a little bit of a disadvantage, but we'll get back to it later for those who haven't. Oh, sorry, did I say disadvantage? The people who have done the Republic will have an advantage. Okay, but the main thing is simply that beautiful things can have a share of both beauty and ugliness. Remember the participation in the forms, that a beautiful thing participates absolute beauty. But remember, in the same way that, you know, two things participates two. There's the two things, but they participate two, and two in itself is pure two-ness. A circle, a circle participates absolute concept of the circle. So it's that sort of stuff that we've done before. And it's the same way here. So a beautiful thing, even if it is a very beautiful thing, still has a share of ugliness, because absolutely beautiful forms is pure in itself. And we might also say that other things that are like justice, you know, it's a completely different form. It's not beauty, but it's another form. So there's that stuff going on as well. So now consider, then she brings up wisdom and ignorance, and then this gets weaved into the discussion. So wisdom is to share in truth, but then between wisdom and complete ignorance, there is what Plato calls correct opinion. Now, those who've studied Republic will remember opinion. We talked about that as halfway between knowledge and ignorance. At doxa, remember doxa as in orthodox and that sort of thing? It came up in the sun analogy and the divided line. So correct opinion is not complete ignorance. It shares in the truth because it's correct. It participates truth halfway between ignorance and wisdom. So correct opinion is defined as knowledge, knowing the truth, but unable to give an account of it. So remember, account, the word here is that word logos. Perhaps why it's true, how is it true, or how that truth relates to everything else. So correct opinion is to have the truth without the logos. So anyway, let's go back to eros. Eros, love, is in between beauty and ugly. It's in between good and bad, but in a very special way. Eros is not even a god. And Socrates, you already know this. But Socrates doesn't have an account. So Socrates goes, well, you know, tell me about this. Give me your account, your logos. So then there's the Q&A, and Socrates is on the receiving end, as we were saying. So gods are beautiful, right? They're absolutely beautiful. Eros loves the beautiful. So Eros must lack beauty. We got so far on that one. So Eros is not beautiful. So Eros is not a god. Great logic, eh? So where's it heading? If Eros is not a god, then he is not immortal. So is Eros immortal? No, silly. Eros is in between. He's in between the gods and the mortals. He's a daimon. So we've come across them before. A spirit or a divine medium. So Eros is a daimon, like a Holy Spirit, a medium between the mortals and the immortals, a medium between the gods and humans. Okay, so now at this point, Diotima offers a new myth of Eros. Just, whoa, here we go, new myth of Eros. Actually, Eros was conceived at the celebration of the birth of Aphrodite. So there was a big drunken party, and poverty got together, poverty female, got together with resource male, the two gods. And Eros shares the characteristics of both its parents. Eros is impoverished, but a skilled seeker of beauty and good. So Eros lacks a lot of things. I don't know whether he's actually ugly, but lacks, but is a seeker, a skillful seeker of beauty and good. And who does this remind you of? Perhaps Socrates? We'll see later how that fits with Socrates when we get on to next week's section. So the introduction, this damion stands between mortality and immortality, but also between wisdom and ignorance, like opinion. The gods don't love wisdom because they are already wise. Nor does anyone who is already wise. Someone who is already wise doesn't lack wisdom, so doesn't love it. The ignorant also don't love wisdom because they don't know what they're missing. So it's kind of like blissful ignorance. So who then are the lovers of wisdom? Wisdom is one of the most beautiful things, and love is love of beauty. So love must be an ignorance. Okay, so Socrates mistook the beloved for the lover. Beauty wisdom is the object of the lover's desire. Okay, so now the next stage that we're going to here is where things start to merge, the forms start to merge as they're going higher up. So here we start to see, firstly, that beautiful things, the most beautiful thing is wisdom. Okay, when Diotima makes the switch from beauty to the good, that's kind of the next step. So these two are already starting to be synonymous in this dialogue, but also elsewhere in Plato. We remember the form of the good and the desire for beauty in other contexts. So then from beauty to good, the next step is to goodness makes you happy. And endless happiness is the ultimate goal. So that's it. That's interesting stopping point, isn't it? Like, okay, so that's what we all want, right? Okay, and I think in a note on this translation, that was kind of like an accepted Athenian or Greek higher goodness, that what everyone wants is actually happiness, and happiness all the time. So I don't know what we say about that, but that's where it stops. If all want happiness, then why do we call some lovers and others not? Well, it's a matter of semantics. And so he takes a sidetrack and then weaves this in about poets. Now, the word for poet is poesis, right? Which literally means creator. We only call the poet creator of poems, but anyone who brings something into being is a creator. Now, there's actually an English equivalent that you can think of in this case. When we talk about a composer, like a composer of music, when you say someone's a composer, you're generally thinking of music. You don't maybe say a composer of a painting or something else, or maybe you do, a composer of art in general. But that's the sort of thing where it has a specific application, but it could be used more generally. Well, it's just the same with love. There is a narrow sense of love and a broader one. And again, in English, we have this. There's a narrow sense of the lover, right? You know, my lover, but there's also the lover of money, the lover of fame, and so on. Actually, in Greek, there is a different word that's usually used here, and people can help me out if I've got this wrong, but of course, philosophy And pedophile and Hellenophile is using a different root there to describe love of those sorts of things. Whereas actually in English, we talk about, you know, love of the Greeks or love of children and so on. So Socrates generalizes. Desire for good things and for being happy is the more general meaning of love. He says, the only object of people's love is the good. People love the good. Love is love to have the good forever. Love is love to have the good forever. We are now brought back to the comparison with poetry, with poesis, creation, where the motive of love is to create or generate in beauty. So an interesting aside here is, have you ever wondered about the expression for the act of sex? The polite expression for the act of sex is to make love. So you make love, it's to generate love in beauty. And even the word having sex. So these words kind of describe the activity. Making love kind of describes the activity in these terms. So now, mortals, now, then he talks about, then she goes into immortality. So mortals achieve a form of immortality by giving birth and by the desire to do so in beauty. So love is a desire for immortality, and one way to achieve that is it's from the male point of view here, to desire to create in beauty. Now, interestingly, there's a unusual use of pregnant here. It says pregnant is used here where a man is pregnant with his desire. So we might think he's pregnant with his seed, his desire to create in his beloved. And so we can compare this again with Socrates and with his question and answer, where he portrays himself as a midwife to help people give birth, or young, beautiful boys to give birth to wisdom. Anyway, reproduction is reproduction as creation in beauty. Love is love of immortality, and love of offspring in this love is this love. Love is love of immortality, and love of offspring is this love. So we love our children, perhaps we'll die for our children because they are our immortality. This creative reproduction occurs in each individual organism as it reproduces itself. So he brings in this other thing about when our hair grows and when our cells replace themselves and everything. This is a love that continues the individual's life. So love of immortality is also expressed in love of fame, living forever in fame. So he talks about war heroes living in that way, or great poets or something. So, and then he goes on to, so he talks about the pregnant thing, and he says, a man pregnant in mind brings about poetry and innovative craftsmanship. And also the offspring of the mind is wisdom. And he talks about various sorts of wisdom, like the wisdom of the lawmaker Solon, the founder of the law in Athens, who often comes up in Plato, and also teachers of moral guidance and virtue. That's their offspring is the law, is the virtue in society, and so on. Men of this nature tend to have relationships with beautiful, intelligent young men, and then give birth to wisdom. And then Diotima says, even you, Socrates, could perhaps be initiated in the rite of this love. What an invitation. So now we're getting towards what's called Diotima's mysteries. Now remember, we've talked a bit before about the influence of the mystery cults, the Orphic and I can't get any words out today, Ulyssean mystery cults. That and in a way, some people see Plato's project is to use a different technique, to use his Q&A to basically give the wisdom that's coming out of these cults. Now, we don't actually know a great deal because they were kept secret at the time. But anyway, this is so the journey like to the final of the mystery. So this mystery of love. And this is the last section we're going to be talking about today. So I hope I've still got everyone with us. So this mystery is like a journey, a path, going on stages up to the highest vision. So we can compare it here with the journey out of the cave in the Republic. And so those people who haven't studied the Republic might have heard of the idea that we're trapped in a cave and that we're looking at shadows, and then you are released and you turn around and realize where you are, and then go out of the cave and then go into the forms and then look directly at the form or form. So it's a step thing, and so is this one. And this was probably written before the Republic too. So that's kind of interesting. And then it's developed later in the Republic. So it's a rite of love. This rite of love is a journey invoking the mystery cults of Greece at the time. This journey to the higher beauty is comparable to a journey out of the cave. I said that, sorry. And it's staged like a staircase. So I'll just go through the steps. Start with love of one's beloved. So presumably of a pretty boy. And this is love of his body. Then, and there you create beautiful discourses. So like the Phaedrus maybe is a beautiful discourse with a pretty boy. So love of all, then you move on to love of all lovelies, all the lovely boys. You like them all. You don't think one is good, they're all good, right? And I'm thinking of Marlene Dietrich singing, I've been in love before, haven't you? But love of all, yeah, so the next step is love of the beautiful mind. So, you know, you're in love with the boy and then you move towards love of mind. And the creation there is creating discourses that make men better. Okay, so discourses that lead to an improvement of the mind and improvement virtuously. The next stage is love of beauty in practice and in law, which we've already talked about. And at this point, you start to see the relationship between all types of beauty. At this stage, also, bodily beauty seems a bit petty. Okay, so the next stage is love of beauty in knowledge. Persons, particular people and practices. So you love, you know, like love, actually. The next stage is boundless love, and what's creases make about love. Okay. Anyone got some?
Wow. I was just wondering what, when 208B, when talking about being pregnant and talking about immortality and children, and It's, you know, it's to achieve immortality that everything grows, shows this enthusiasm. That's what love is. So I just wondered exactly what Agathon would have thought of that, you know, if he was gay, presuming he didn't have a wife and didn't have children. It's sort of like a kick in the head, maybe.
I saw this, reading this particular passage, the reproductive biologist came into me, and and I thought of the selfish gene. You know, Richard Dawkins and things like that. It's not exactly, we don't protect our young just because we love them, but because we want our genes to perpetuate. And this is the key that as mortals, as Diotima says, we can become immortal. And I felt happy because I was so disappointed by Aleximachos's speech before, but and I'm thinking, oh, you know, you're putting science the same way that you treat poetry. Come on, you know. And in this passage, I felt, yes, all right. I follow this, and I can appreciate it. It's a very scientific way, in a way, and putting this in the antiquities, I think ahead of its time.
Oh, that's an interesting, because today I attended an astronomy session, and the astrophysicist said, oh, well, you know, things that were written in ancient times were written by people with the knowledge of that time, but now we look at them with the abundant knowledge that we have today. But when you read what you know, the philosophers have written, it's you know, to any person today is hard pressed to sort of pick it up and read it and instantly you know, understand everything that was said. It's very, very complex thought. And
well, can I just go in there, Kula? It's also very simple. It's also very simple, very elementary as well, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's not necessarily complex. And this is, can I just throw that in, because this is a real thing that does annoy me, that people say, oh, they couldn't have thought about that. I had this thing about binary numbers and binary stuff in ancient China and ancient Greece. You know, clearly they're right into binary, and people would just say, oh no, that thing in ancient China couldn't be binary because they hadn't invented that yet.
Yes,
it's so simple and so obvious that of course they've got it. Sorry.
Yes. Yeah, that's it on the head. That you've hit the nail on the head there. Yeah.
Okay. Anyone else?
I found it interesting that there's a lot of layers of rules in this passage about love. So, you know, if you do this, then you'll attain that, or you'll get virtue if you do this. Like, you know, it's actually quite rules based. And when I first read it, I thought, oh my gosh, you know, that's not love. That's not how we do love, until I really reflected on modern day love. And it's actually quite similar. You know, the culture may have changed and shifted, but there's still a bunch of rules that exist in our day and age around love. So, and then, you know, putting those things together, it's not that different.
And it's interesting, the staircase, or the myth of the staircase, and it's those stages. And it's also interesting that Diotima speaks of contemplation, you know, meditation in order to, while you're going through these stages, and you need that, and you need participation to finally gaze upon absolute beauty and really sense that absolute beauty.
Okay. Is there anyone who hasn't spoken yet? I'm just aware that we are a big group, and anyone who hasn't spoken yet wants to say something. How are you going there, Sue? Vula? Alexandra?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this notion of the staircase, and if I understand it correctly, it seems to be saying that the higher form of love is as you approach the love of learning, wisdom, etc. And it seems then to keep the love of a body at a lower step. And I'm just wondering how genuine that is, given, you know, everything we read about, you know, in about the love of young boys, etc.
How genuine in what sense?
Well, how genuine this notion that the higher form of love is a kind of spiritual, or as you reach for learning and wisdom, rather than, you know, and that the love of the body is a lower step.
Well, it is in a number of traditions, mystical traditions, and the one I think of immediately is Sufism, and which talks of love in this way. And so at a certain point, you get to a detachment. You go through a stage of detachment from, you know, you start thinking, as it says here, of, you know, bodily beauty. Suddenly you start to become petty. And you become detached from love of physical things because you're directing towards these, you know, these forms, this world. You've got up out of your chair, you've turned around, and you're heading up out of the cave, and you're studying the forms, and suddenly you're not interested in, well, not suddenly, but slowly, you're not interested in you don't have carnal desire as much level, until you finally come to, in Sufism, to union with the beloved, peace, with a lack of desire. So I don't know, is that helpful?
The love of, well, the love that men had for younger boys' bodies.
Oh, okay. So we're not talking, there's ancient Greece, and there's Plato's influence here. And so what's the interesting thing for us, I think, is we go and say, well, what was Greek culture like then? And what were their ideas about various things, like even deity and all that? And how is it different from ours? We are on the other side of Plato. We are in a way in a corruption of Plato, where, or at least a distortion, or maybe we are in the true other side of Plato. So with Platonism in the West, it introduced this monotheism, this mystical monotheism, this rejection, this detachment, rejection from the body. Now that has been interpreted in different ways, in which, you know, like attitudes to sex that we had in, you know, a century ago or whatever in the UK, and that sort of thing. But we're living on the other side of this. And so Plato's not saying what everyone does in Greece. He's saying, if you like, it's not what everyone does in Greece. He's saying, you know, follow my Zen path, or whatever you want to call it. Follow my Platonic path to this higher goal. And when we were reading the Republic, for those people in the Republic, remember there was this whole section about society could not possibly breed philosophers. Even if there are people with the philosopher nature, they couldn't survive in this society. And that's why we need to create a republic, educate people well, promote the virtues, turn away from all this, worship of the body and everything, and have everyone, or at least the philosophers, focused on these higher ideals. So it's not at all reflecting Greek society. It's the reverse. It's a rejection of Greek society. Plato's saying in the Republic, it's impossible to have a philosopher to follow this path in Greek society.
And he does not speak against it's not antibody if you like. It's just that there is a higher love. He doesn't dismiss it. He doesn't dismiss synusia in intercourse or love of the body. It's just that there is another realm which is higher.
That's right. It doesn't mean you don't have sex.
Yeah.
Sorts of things at the different levels. It's like you get this broader vision and this broader and broader vision, and it makes you more aware of beauty in itself. You still see it in sensible things. You still see the beauty in your lover. I mean, Socrates, if he's a model, still sees the beauty in Phaedrus in the next dialogue. Or, he's charmed by Phaedrus. I'll go walking with you anywhere, especially if we start chatting, because I just love chatting with you, So, yeah, but it's going to higher levels, but that doesn't mean you don't enjoy those higher levels in the particulars. I suppose that's one way of putting it. Okay, anyone else?
What about Diotima? Couldn't she have been a real person? I mean, every other character in the dialogues, I mean, we think that there were real people, and there is a little city in a little town in southern Greece, in the Peloponnese, called Mantinia. So I mean, I know with the prophetess.
I want to believe that, Maria. Can we just?
Yeah, I want to believe it too.
I want to believe it too. Yeah. Well, she could be, but it's not. I think there are other fiction. Just a small point. I think there are other fictional characters. People believe fictional characters in Plato's writing. I think they think that Euthyphro was fictional.
Oh.
Yeah. So I think there's some others. Yeah.
So when I read it though, and I saw that she was the person who taught him about love, I mean, what did we all think the moment we read that? That obviously she was the one. I thought she must have been like one of those women who just took him in, was really wise because she's had sex with lots of people, and she was, that I sort of glossed over the whole thing, that she was quite divine there, but but there's no chance that she was one of those women like in Zorba the Greek that knew everybody and had done everything. Huh?
Like Aspasia or Etera, like that were highly regarded. Who knows?
In Kazantzaki's Symposium, which is sort of modeled on Plato's Symposium, there was a woman in the discussion.
Right.
And I'm just wondering Kazantzakis brought the woman, you know, the Abmandia, into it, you know, into the symposium, as opposed to, you know, being someone that Socrates had a discussion with.
So it was kind of you think it's kind of a modification or a
yeah.
Because
he brought the woman. You know, he brought a woman into the symposium. She was,
and we should remember that there's important priestess roles in Greek society. They certainly were. I mean, if you go to the oracle
And if you read Plutarch, I mean, neutral was provided by.
And if you misplace the comma, if you put the comma a little bit further down, you would get a totally different, the opposite meaning.
that's right.
They were clever woman, but it didn't happen. Oh no, you misinterpreted what
Yes.
There's great examples of that, isn't there? Yeah.
I was just wondering, I haven't read it this week, to be honest, I confess, but I just, from listening to everybody, it seems to be there's a progression, a positive progression towards the spiritual love from the bodily love through those stages. Is there, you know, any possibility that you can stop seeing the beauty in something, therefore there isn't the wisdom there anymore, and there isn't the love there anymore, and you regress through the stages, for example, as opposed to progressing, so that you do, we hear the term, you know, to fall out of love as well with something. So you stop seeing the beauty in something. The divorce rate currently is pretty high. So, you know, there is that loss of beauty, that loss of seeing that good, or the lacking is somehow comes to the forefront, as opposed to, you know, moving towards that more ideal state of finding that beauty.
Yes, and do you see that in your friends who are on their mystical journey, whether it is with Eastern religions or with Plato or whatever? You know, there is a falling out of love sometimes. You sometimes see people losing their way, don't you? I think that's an interesting one. Thank you, Sue. Anyone else?
But if you find true wisdom, you can't undo that.
Right. You think so?
Good.
Yeah. Okay. Well, is Plato saying that, you think, Martha?
That's why I think it can only be an ascent, and that he only describes an ascent.
Mm-hmm.
It may be unattainable or very difficult, but
yeah, it's
if you do reach some heights, you can't go backwards.
Yeah, it's like,
unless you're denying it.
So if to take it a completely different way, it's like eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge. You can never, once you have that knowledge,
yeah,
you can never go back, you know.
But if you find wisdom or knowledge in one thing, does that mean you have general wisdom and knowledge of all things?
Well, I think what he's saying is that wisdom at its higher level is united. It's all one. And so what people would say is you can take different paths to that wisdom. So it's more that it is one, and in different cultures it might be expressed in different ways. But if you're just finding the wisdom in particular things, then you're only at a lower stage on the journey.
I understood it a little bit different. I understood it as if it's a constant journey towards wisdom, knowledge. Like you don't actually ever get there, but you're in the medium, so to speak. Like it's not something you can actually attain. You can just go on that journey and continue to go on that journey to be happy. That was my interpretation.
Oh, yeah. Look, I think that's, yeah, I think that's a valid interpretation for sure.
Because in that sense, like eating the apple would be trying to encompass the knowledge rather than always trying to reach it.
Encompass it, yes, or maybe reaching for an idol, reaching for an image, as Plato would say, and not the real thing, perhaps.
Or you could describe it as like a step is finite, eating an apple or a bite of an apple, it's only a bite anyway, is a step towards further knowledge. And whatever knowledge that you actually do absorb, you can't unabsorb it. And it is a progression. You've got to keep going.
Or just a way to blame women for every mishap that's occurred throughout the ages.
Something else came to me. It wasn't actually in the book, but it was in my mind right through reading it. And at one stage, somebody mentioned the body getting old. And like the bones getting old, and then I thought, is it something about the youth that reminds man of his previous self? So keeping when he was ignorant and when he gained the knowledge and being in the medium of that, it wasn't clear in the book, but it was in my mind right through the reading.
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Has anyone got any thoughts on that? Okay. So how are we going? Okay, so maybe we can just look at a bit of a summary of where we've gone and where we're heading. So we've got through the symposium. I split it up into 3. I think it's probably a natural split into 3, like the initial speeches, and then the big stuff we're doing today. And then it's kind of downhill a bit tomorrow because, but it's dramatic. It's all very dramatic. So Alcibiades, did I say that right, Maria?
Yeah, Alcibiades, yes.
Yeah, so he's actually a very famous person. I thought I'd flick over to Wikipedia and have a look at his page, and it just goes on forever. This guy is a famous general, politician, and everything. And he storms in just after where we've got to right here. So we've gone right up on this mystical journey. We're up there, right at level 12 or whatever it is. We're gazing or trying to gaze at the form of beauty itself, and in storms this rowdy drunkard with I think some prostitutes on his arm or something like that. So this kind of announces a new stage in the dialogue. And there's a contrast here between, I suppose, the behavior of Alcibiades and everyone else, I suppose, because things do start getting a bit out of hand, and his description of Socrates' behavior, especially Socrates' behavior as a lover or as a non-lover, perhaps. So that's what we get into there. And then after that, we're going to do 3 stages of the Phaedrus. And so, as I think we've mentioned before, the Phaedrus is a dialogue between Socrates and Phaedrus, who did the first speech in this this place. So, and they go for a walk along outside the wall. Socrates hardly ever goes outside the wall, and they sit under a tree and they start discussing love, but they also cover some other topics. So we'll actually be moving away from love a bit. We'll be discussing things like rhetoric again, and writing and the written form, and the problems that Socrates had. Really ironic, because it's the first philosopher. Plato is the first philosopher we've got where we've actually got his written works to play with. But it deals with these issues about representation and the forms, and how the forms can be expressed in things. But really what you've got to do to really get to wisdom is to understand what is beyond the form's actual expressions in things. So you've got to climb up the stages. So so that'll be, so next week we do our last one on the symposium, and it gets out of hand. Now, did anyone watch the video I put up? Maria told me she watched it, which has the Oxbridge style interpretation of the symposium. Has anyone seen that? Oh, okay. Do we recommend it, Maria?
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, it's yeah. I would recommend it. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to describe it a little bit?
The English country style. The background is a manor, of course. There is rain. There is pomposity. Obviously, you have to do with very well-to-do people who are the students. Which perhaps reflects, Plato's reality. And there is a symposium, there is a meal, and there is drinking. There is also humor, sort of almost like Monty Python-esque humor. And you have the speeches, the gist of it. Alcibiades' speech at the end, I mean, all the naughty bits have been cut out. So there is a very, very sanitized version. But I thought it wasn't bad. The only thing that I found very strange was, and I said that to Bernie, was the Renaissance Elizabethan music. I mean, and perhaps you can see it as a transition. You have the Renaissance music and then the modern, because it's a modern version of the symposium.
Quite good, isn't it, Maria? I found it.
Yes, I mean, there are some old people there, like Leo McKern, who you have that, and you get an adequate summary of that for sure. But when it comes to Alcibiades, a sanitized version.
Well, because of course, I think in 1965, homosexuality was illegal in the UK. So yeah, some of the speeches had to be seriously redacted that wants to have a look at that.
Yeah.
I think it's up on our resources page, so
Yeah.
tell us how you find it. So has anyone got anything else to say on our reading today before we finish?
No, but I've got something to say about 1965, which I don't, and I should probably, but in the 70s, when I remember when homosexuality was legalized in the UK, the big joke was, well, I'm going to leave the country before they make it compulsory. And by the way, this talking about the 70s, if you remember the 70s, you weren't there.
Okay, thanks, Kula. Thanks very much. Okay, so Phil, go on.
Yeah, it sort of brings to mind what Peter Dutton, I think, said, or one of the conservatives said, that if gay marriage is allowed, we'll be next thing will be marrying animals. You know.
Oh God.
Oh yes, well, of course, that'd be, you know, Peter Dutton's natural transition.
Okay. Anyone else on today's reading, or?
Can I just really quickly at the sum up for the end was that there was a whole lot of elements at the end talking about immortality and fame being immortal, art being immortal, as well as childbirth and all that. So basically what he is saying, you think it's actually like a reverse thing, that he's not saying that you have to have a baby necessarily to be immortal, but there is a whole range of things, and immortality and love is the immortality.
Okay. So Phil, the way I see it is that he's talking about the desire, really helpful, the desire, the erotic desire, which is broadened out, is a fundamental attribute of humans and of nature. So it's a fundamental thing, and it can be directed in different ways. Think of Freud. Freud talks about it that way, you know, and into what he called perversions and things like that. So it's a fundamental desire in nature. So it's in humans. It can be directed towards fame. I want to be immortal. I want to be what's that? That song Fame from the musical. I want to live forever. I want to live forever. Light up my, you know, live forever in fame. I want my gene, selfish gene, to live forever. It's a fundamental desire. And so, you know, of course, he relates it to what we think of evolutionary biology, but it's this, you know, it's in creation, it's in creation's desire to reproduce itself. We want to reproduce ourselves. All you need is mutation and you get evolution, you know. So it's really saying that it's fundamental in all these different ways. It's not saying that it's every expression is good, or virtuous in the sense that we think of it. It's good in an elementary way, I suppose. That's the way I'm seeing it. Does that kind of make sense, Phil?
Yeah, sure.
You can have a negative immortality too, as in notoriety, and the most evil humans will never be forgotten.
Yeah,
Good
like the person who shot John Lennon, that sort of thing. Yeah, you know, you want to live forever, or do a massacre. That's right. It's there in very extreme ways.
Or if your kid turns out to be a real shithead.
I think my father might agree with you.
Well,
yeah. So Hitler's mum, yeah.
Well,
yeah.
Actually, it's interesting where he speaks about immortality without physical children, but the children of poets, artists, whatever, are actually more beautiful and more you know,
Values them more because they're children of the soul.
Of the soul,
yes.
Yeah.
Like Homer's child, he mentioned.
That's right. Homer's child is poetry. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. All right. That seems like a high round. And I got some extra questions. I'll just leave it on. So goodbye and see you same time.
Have a good week, everyone.
Yeah, have a
You
good
too.
Thank you.
Take care.